Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Lisa Mateo. Here are the top stories we're following today.
Lisa, we begin with new developments this morning on Warner Brothers Discovery. President Trump is flagging concerns over Netflix's planned $72 billion acquisition of the company. The deal is still in its early stages, but it would bring together the world's dominant streaming service with the iconic Hollywood movie studio. Praising Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos, whom he met with recently, President Trump, though, is hinting to reporters that regulators could take issue with the size of the combined entity.
He's done one of the greatest jobs in the history of movies and other things. He's got a lot of interesting things happening aside from what you're talking about. But it is a big market share. There's no question about it. It could be a problem.
President Trump hosted Sarandos at the White House in mid-November when the pair discussed a deal, and checking shares of Warner Brothers Discovery in the pre-market, they are down 2%.
Well, staying in Washington, Nathan, later today, President Trump, he plans to unveil a long-awaited aid package for farmers. A White House official tells Bloomberg the $12 billion package includes $11 billion in one-time payments under the Agriculture Department's Farmer Bridge Assistance Program. The move comes with farmers getting more frustrated about China's slow pace of resuming soybean and other agricultural purchases. But U.S. Trade Representative Jamison Greer says China is holding up its end of the trade agreement with the U.S.
The commitments are quite specific. They're about purchasing, a certain amount of soybeans, for example, through the rest of this growing season and then each of the next years. These are things that are quantifiable. The data are clear. We've already seen that the Chinese are getting to about a third of the way through their purchase commitment for this growing season.
U.S. Trade Representative Jamison Greer appeared on Fox News. President Trump is scheduled to unveil the farm aid this afternoon at 2 p.m. Wall Street time at an event with crop farmers, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins.
And ahead of that event, Lisa, Treasury Secretary Bessent says the Trump administration is focused on affordability. He spoke yesterday on CBS's Face the Nation.
Democrats created scarcity, whether it was in energy or overregulation, that we are now seeing this affordability problem. And I think next year we're going to move on to prosperity.
And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says he expects the U.S. economy to end the year with 3% GDP growth. And you can catch CBS's Face the Nation Sunday afternoons on Bloomberg Radio.
And turning now to geopolitics, Nathan. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, he's doubling down on deadly airstrikes on suspected drug-running boats off the Venezuelan coast. At the Reagan Defense Forum in California over the weekend, Hegseth defended Admiral Frank Bradley for ordering a second strike that killed survivors aboard one vessel on September 2nd.
From what I understood then and what I understand now, I fully support that strike. I would have made the same call myself.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the Pentagon is reviewing video of the attack. He's declining to say whether it will be released to the public. Jim Himes is a top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. He says the video should come to light.
I think it's really important that people see what it looks like when the full force of the United States military is turned on two guys who are clinging to a piece of wood and about to go under, just so that they have sort of a visceral feel for what it is that we're doing.
Democratic Congressman Jim Himes appeared on CBS's Face the Nation, heard every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio.
Let's turn now, Lisa, to the latest developments on ending the war in Ukraine. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is set to host Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in London today. The leaders of France and Germany will join the meeting as well. Tony Halpin leads Bloomberg's economic and government coverage of Russia.
The Europeans are trying to bolster Ukraine's leverage at this table because they themselves are not there. But at the same time, they want to help Ukraine maintain its positions in the face of what is fairly considerable pressure to agree to a deal. And the US has been in direct negotiations with Ukraine and has been in direct negotiations with Russia. The peace plan that they are talking about originated as a joint US-Russia peace plan. And so the European leaders are trying to ensure that Zelensky isn't pushed into a corner and agrees to a deal that doesn't secure Ukraine's long-term security.
That's Bloomberg's Tony Halpin. President Trump says he's disappointed in Zelensky's handling of the U.S. proposal to end the war.
Well, staying in Europe, Nathan, J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon says bureaucracy is having a significant impact on the continent's growth prospects. In an interview over the weekend with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde, Dimon also said a fracturing of the continent could become a major problem for the U.S.
If they fragment, then you could say that that America first will not be around anymore. it will hurt us more than anybody else because they are a major ally in every single way, including common values, which are really important. So therefore, I think we should be using our American capability, strength, coercion, democracy, trade, investment to urge them to do what's in their own self-interest.
Diamond's comments come at a difficult moment for U.S.-European relations as the two sides find themselves increasingly at odds on issues ranging from Ukraine to trade and regulation. For the full conversation, head over to the Bloomberg Podcast channel on YouTube.
Turning to markets now, Lisa. Futures are mixed this morning ahead of Wednesday's rate decision from the Federal Reserve, and we have a couple of big market calls this morning. Morgan Stanley's Mike Wilson says U.S. equities face a, quote, bullish setup given expectations of rate cuts and the outlook for improving earnings. John Stoltzfus, chief investment strategist at Oppenheimer Asset Management, says the S&P 500 will surge 18% in 2026 as earnings per share continue to rise in double digits, and Wall Street Research veteran Ed Yardeni is now recommending underweighting the Magnificent Seven megacap tech stocks versus the rest of the S&P 500.
It's hard to recommend overweighting something that's already quite overweight. I mean, if you just told people just to maintain the current weight of the index, that would still be an overweight position relative to what most people would think would be a diversified portfolio.
Ed Yardeni of Yardeni Research instead recommends investing in financials, industrials, and healthcare.
In company news, Nathan, the Wall Street Journal reporting IBM is in advanced negotiations to acquire data infrastructure firm Confluent for about $11 billion. The paper says a deal which would mark one of IBM's biggest acquisitions in recent years could be announced as early as today. Shares of Confluent are up 31% in early trading. For a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Lisa. A pre-trial hearing is scheduled to resume today for the man accused of killing the CEO of United Healthcare. A New York judge is considering whether certain pieces of evidence can be used against Luigi Mangione during his state trial. Mangione's defense attorneys said that the police did not read their client his Miranda rights. New images were released over the weekend from the day of Mangione's arrest. Those include a USB stick that he was wearing as a necklace, a December 4th bus ticket from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, and a to-do list that was found folded up in his pocket. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel expects to move to the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan soon. Netanyahu says that he would discuss opportunities for peace with President Trump when he meets him later this month. Netanyahu also voiced opposition to a Palestinian state.
The purpose of a Palestinian state is to destroy the one and only Jewish state. They already had a state in Gaza, a de facto state, and it was used to try to destroy the one and only Jewish state.
The truce between Israel and Hamas remains fragile, with both sides accusing the other of violations. The Trump administration has released a new calendar that changes the free entry days for national parks. It removes Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Juneteenth, both federal holidays, and adding Flag Day, which is not a federal holiday, on June 14th. That just happens to be President Trump's birthday. Pastor, activist, and author Jamal Bryant.
Everything that they did in the civil rights community is trying to be erased and dismissed as if it never happened.
Pastor Jamal Bryant and other critics say no sitting president has had their birthday declared as a free day in the park. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with the Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Lisa.
Thanks, Michael. Time now for our Bloomberg Sports Update. And for that, we bring in John Stashower.
There were some big games in the NFL. The Packers never trailed, beat the Bears 28-21. The Steelers held off the Ravens in Baltimore 27-22. The Jaguars topped the Colts 36-19. In all three cases, the winner now in sole possession of first in their division. Last night, Houston won at Kansas City 20-10. Looks like the Chiefs are going to miss the playoffs. Jeff Kent, named for induction to the Baseball Hall of Fame, has the most home runs ever for a second baseman. Notre Dame got snubbed, didn't make the college football playoff. That's your Bloomberg Sports Update.
Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak coming up after this.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. One of the biggest mergers in Hollywood history could be facing some pushback in Washington, D.C. President Trump is raising doubts about Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos and his planned $72 billion takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery.
He's got a lot of interesting things happening aside from what you're talking about. But it is a big market share. There's no question about it. It could be a problem.
President Trump spoke ahead of the Kennedy Center honors in the nation's capital. For more, we're joined by Bloomberg Markets reporter Valerie Teitel. And of course, Valerie, we are very early days into this planned merger, but could we be seeing this deal stopped in its tracks out of the nation's capital? Good morning.
Well, look, if we take a look at the market reaction and pre-market, we are seeing Netflix and Warner Brothers reverse some of Friday's moves. So there is a bit of skepticism on this deal now that we heard these comments from President Trump that the size of their market share combined could be a problem. We've seen also bets on the prediction marketplace Polymarket, which did show a 60% chance of the deal closing in 2026, is now all the way down to 25. So the market is showing some skepticism here that this combined unit between Netflix and Warner Brothers could be something that the regulators could declare as harmful to consumers. The combined unit would have some 450 million users under one streaming giant, and it will face a lengthy Justice Department review. We have heard from U.S. lawmakers on both parties, including Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren, already faulting the transaction as harmful to the consumer base. And the European Union regulators are also likely to subject the Netflix proposal to an extensive review. But it does follow some interesting Bloomberg reporting that the co-CEO of Netflix was at the White House back in November, met with President Trump for over an hour to get Trump's blessing on the proposed deal. And he did leave with the impression that Netflix wouldn't face immediate opposition from the White House. Now, the other thing that could complicate this is the other bidder for Warner Brothers Discovery, that was Paramount Skydance, could perhaps do some lobbying efforts to try to disrupt the plan. Now, Paramount Skydance wanted to buy the whole company, and regulators are more likely to approve of a Paramount Warner Brothers merger. So still a lot of drama in this merger to play out, but it does seem like there is a hint of skepticism now trading in the markets about this deal closing.
Yeah, interesting to hear that Paramount Skydance could potentially be brought back into play here, given the CEO, David Ellison, his fairly close ties to President Trump as well. I mean, how unusual is it to see this kind of politicization of a merger like this so early in the process?
Well, at least one thing we know is that Trump has had this push of deregulation. He has a new head in the FTC, and they do have a flavor of allowing companies more activity like this. So I think this does perhaps pose a test to the White House, whether they stand by that commitment to deregulation, whether they would let a deal like this go through. But it is very interesting to see the politics so wrapped up. But in a merger this size, Nathan, you're going to have many regulators involved. As I mentioned, the European Union could also get involved in this discussion as well. So it goes down to the size of the merger and the massive company it would create with over 400 million users on one streaming giant platform if Netflix were to take Warner Brothers Discovery.
In our last minute, let's talk about the broader market here. I think a lot of the focus this morning, probably for the rest of this week, is going to be on the Federal Reserve and the final decision of 2025.
Final decision for 2025. And while the markets are wildly predicting the Fed will cut interest rates by 25 basis points, we could be in for a whopping number of dissents in the voting. We've heard from a raft of more hawkish FOMC officials saying they're not comfortable with cutting rates. 5 of them have actually expressed concerns in the last month. If they all dissent, it's something that we have not seen in modern history of the Federal Reserve, a 5-dissent decision if they go ahead and cut interest rates on Wednesday. So a fractured Fed is the focus. And then the focus is on the week after that, the backlog of data, the November CPI and non-farm payroll report are still due before Christmas.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Lisa Mateo. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.